43 years ago, two Boeing 747s collided on a foggy runway. 583 people were killed in what remains till date the worst aviation disaster ever. Today, we're going to look at the almost unbelievable series of coincidences that took place on that fateful day in Cockpit Stories, episode 11. Aviation accidents don't just happen by chance. There is always a chain of events, a series of failures and errors, and also some bad luck is involved for an accident to happen. And this was demonstrated to a level of almost absurdity on that Sunday afternoon 43 years ago. The year is 1977. It's been just 8 years since the Boeing 747 has been introduced into service. It is a big, humongous and a very glamorous airplane. And unfortunately, two of those 747s were the stars in this almost Hollywood movie script-like accident, which ended up killing 583 people. Before we continue guys, a little update. We have a new batch starting at Vinod Aviation Academy for DGCA CPL ground classes. The classes are online, you can join them, you can just sit at home and clear your DGCA exams. The batch is starting from 18th of July. You can register at vyaa.in or you can call upon the numbers coming up on your screen right now. So to get your pilot career started, just give us a call and we'll help you out. Thank you. The story starts at Tenerife airport. Now it's a very small airport on the Canary Islands and it's a very normal, calm, peaceful airport. But today, on this particular Sunday afternoon, it is filled up with airplanes. Because of a bomb blast which happened at a close by airport, all the airplanes landing there have now diverted to Tenerife. As a result, it's jam-packed with airplanes. And amongst those airplanes are two 747s. One belongs to KLM and the other belongs to Pan Am. The KLM 747 is being captained by Jacob Van Zanten. He is the star at KLM. He is their instructor and one of their most senior pilots on the Boeing 747. And unfortunately, he is also the villain of today's story. So both the airplanes are not supposed to be at Tenerife. They had to divert to get there. After the diversion, now they are parked side by side on the tarmac. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they finally get the permission to get moving again and go back to their original destination. However, because the airport is so small, although the Pan Am is ready for departure before the KLM, the size of the two airplanes does not allow the Pan Am to taxi first. As a result, the KLM aircraft has to taxi before the Pan Am. This was amongst one of the various reasons that caused the accident. The weather has been absolutely fine the whole day. It's been absolutely clear, nice blue skies. However, just before the departure of the two airplanes, fog rolls in from the nearby mountains and the whole airport is now covered in fog as the two airplanes are taxiing towards the runway. Before departure, the KLM also requested for additional fuel at the very last minute. This additional fuel increased the weight of the KLM aircraft and its ability to take off earlier. This will also be of consequence in the accident, as we will see soon. Now both the airplanes are taxiing to the runway. However, because of the huge number of airplanes at the airport, the normal taxiway or the normal path to go to the runway is blocked by other planes which are parked on the taxiway. As a result, the 747s will have to reach the end of the runway by doing something known as backtracking. Now backtracking is basically going on the opposite direction of the runway for taxiing and making a 180-degree turn and then lining up for departure. So both the airplanes are now taxiing down the runway one behind the other. The KLM is in front and the Pan Am is behind. But the KLM is quite a lot in front and the airplanes can't see each other because of the heavy blanket of fog which is now covering the entire airport. The KLM aircraft has been instructed by the ATC to proceed to the end of the runway, make a 180-degree turn and wait for its clearance for departure. The Pan Am has been told by the ATC to vacate on the left hand side and wait for the KLM to depart before it can get a chance to take off. Since the air traffic controller cannot see both the airplanes due to the fog, the Pan Am has been instructed by the air traffic controller to report when they are clear of the runway once they have made their left turn. Now, because of the bad visibility, the Pan Am aircraft misses its left hand turn. They could not see the approaching left turn and they cross it. Not a problem, they are instructed by the air traffic control to take the next left turn. However, the problem is the next left turn will make them be on the runway for a few additional seconds, and these few additional seconds will result in a catastrophe. So currently the KLM is lined up for takeoff, ready to go. The Pan Am is still on the runway looking for the next left exit. In the meantime, the KLM aircraft is given the clearance by the ATC. Now this is not the departure clearance, it's called the route clearance, which is basically the series of instructions to be followed after takeoff. This does not constitute a clearance to take off. However, the pilots on the KLM aircraft are irritated. They have been on the ground for a while and they just want to get back home. Captain Van Zanten's voice was specifically seen to be very irritated on the RT. This was noted by the air traffic control and the other pilots who were listening to the RT conversations. The final act is now in motion. The first officer on the KLM aircraft, which is lined up and ready for takeoff, reads back the route clearance given by the ATC. But this is mistaken to be a departure clearance. At the end of the radio transmission by the first officer on the KLM aircraft, the sound of the engines accelerating can be heard. And he says hesitatingly on the RT, "We are now at takeoff." The cockpit voice recorder clearly shows the KLM aircraft captain, Captain Van Zanten, accelerating the engines, setting takeoff thrust and saying, "Let's go." And with that, the 747 begins barreling down the runway, unknown to the Pan Am aircraft as well as to the ATC. As per the Pan Am and the air traffic controller, the KLM aircraft is still at the end of the runway waiting for its departure clearance. Now the KLM first officer says we are at takeoff. At takeoff is not a standard term. It is not used on RT. However, the Pan Am aircraft did hear it and they did feel that something is fishy, something wrong is happening. As a result, the first officer on the Pan Am aircraft, which is still taxiing on the runway, goes on the RT and he says, "And we are still taxiing on the runway." And this transmission by the Pan Am first officer should have told the KLM aircraft to not continue the takeoff. However, very unfortunately, just as the Pan Am first officer said we are still taxiing on the runway, at the very same time the air traffic controller calls the KLM aircraft and says, "Okay, wait for departure clearance." Now on RT, when two aircraft speak at the same time, nothing can be heard. It's all garbled. It's not like a phone where two people can speak at the same time. On RT, only one aircraft can speak at a time. If two people speak at the same time, it becomes unreadable. And as a result, all that the KLM aircraft, which was barreling down the runway and gaining speed every second, all they heard was some garble and some random RT noise. 10 seconds later, there is one final exchange on the RT. The ATC controller tells the Pan Am aircraft, "Report when you're clear of the runway." The Pan Am aircraft responds to this by saying, "We'll report when clear." However, the captain and the first officer on the KLM aircraft did not hear this transmission. They were too busy with the takeoff and they just did not concentrate on it. However, the second officer on the KLM aircraft heard it and he leant forward during the takeoff and he told the captain and the first officer, "Is he not clear, that Pan Am?" And to this, Captain Van Zanten very emphatically on the CVR replies, "Oh yes," and the takeoff is still continued. The Pan Am crew still feel that something wrong is happening. And on the CVR from the Pan Am aircraft, the captain is heard saying, "Let's just get out of here." A few moments later, the two 747s are coming head on for each other, just 2000 feet apart. The lights of the KLM 747 appear out of the grey fog right in front of the Pan Am aircraft. The Pan Am crew notice the 747 heading their way, and they try and turn the aircraft towards the left, apply full thrust on the engines in an attempt to get off the runway and get onto the grass on the side. Captain Van Zanten on board the KLM 747 also sees the Pan Am straight in front of them. He attempts to get the aircraft airborne and leap over the Pan Am aircraft. However, the aircraft does not have sufficient speed and they see each other too late. The KLM 747 drags its tail on the runway for 70 feet, but unfortunately it is unable to clear the Pan Am 747. Although the KLM did manage to get airborne, its landing gear and its engines slashed through the Pan Am 747. The aircraft then settles back on the runway, skids on its belly for 1,000 feet and eventually turns into a huge ball of fire. And none of the 248 people on board are able to escape. Of the 396 people on board the Pan Am 747, 61 magically survive. Now after the crash, when the first officer on the Pan Am aircraft reaches his hand up to find the cut-off levers. So there are levers on the roof of the aircraft. When you pull them, they will cut off the engines completely. When he moves his hand up, he is unable to find the levers. And when he looks back up, the whole roof is gone. The whole cockpit roof was blown off by the KLM 747. He could actually see the tail of the aircraft 200 feet behind him from the flight deck of the 747. But miraculously, all the cockpit crew on board the Pan Am aircraft survived the crash. The aircraft had been pancaked into the ground by the KLM, and all its 4 engines were still running at full speed. The engines eventually just blew up and the aircraft was engulfed in flames. Only 61 people survived the accident and 583 lives were lost on that particular day. And that was the sad and the unfortunate story of the worst aviation accident in the history of the world. That's about it from me for today. I'll see you guys in the next one.